It's been a while since the last time we saw Albedo on screen, unless he's here in the newest wine event, which I haven't played yet. Last time his banner was here was basically on the 24th of November, which is almost a year ago. Yes, it's that long. Surprise? So it would just have been a matter of time before he returns, and in which he will be returning to us very soon as the moment I post this video. Now, since the introduction of Dendro element coming to the game, there is quite a lot of changes in many different characters, plus we haven't got an Albedo build in quite some time. So in today's video, we're going to be going through Albedo's updated build as well as to see how he's going to be doing in the current meta. With that, let's just jump into the video. Now first, we're going to be looking into how good Geo element is in the current meta. So just to be upfront, Geo element in 3.0 is still Geo. Unfortunately, with changes in Dendro reactions, Hoyoverse have concluded to not have any adjustment to Geo reactions, leaving its main role to be crystallized in terms of creating shield and just that. Not to mention, there's absolutely no reaction between Dendro and Geo whatsoever, where these two reactions would have been on those that make the most sense. Now, crystallizing with other element to create shield is fine, but what makes it not favorable many of the time is the chances of Geo messing up your other reactions like vaporize, melt, or especially cancel out the effects of freeze, which are the reason that stops players from using Geo elements many of the time. So Geo will most likely remain to be the least popular element in Genshin Impact, but least popular doesn't mean that it is bad, because Geo cast of characters are really good. Plus Geo resonance isn't bad. Therefore, there will always be people who love Geo elements, and the direction to which what skills future Geo character can have later on will also have direct impact upon its usage. So talking about Geo character, we'll now go through Albedo's best build. First is his skills, in that Albedo is going to be basically one of the easiest characters to play in the whole of Genshin Impact, because first of all, you will almost never use his normal attack unless you love Albedo so much that you're planning to use him as a main DPS, as the whole kit of Albedo doesn't generally support his normal attack. But his E skills is basically the most important thing out of all Albedo's kit, in that Albedo basically sets a flower onto the field, first dealing AoE Geo damage, and whenever enemies are within the field of this flower, they will take AoE Geo damage in intervals, which is around 2 seconds. Now what's good about this skill though is that this skill is the thing that makes Albedo to be basically the best of field damage character in the game till now, because if you build him correctly, which we'll touch on his build in a bit, he will be able to deal up to a 25k off-field damage attack on basically a complete free-to-play build. And then if that is not insane, then I don't know what is, because in comparison, that is almost on the same level of my Yai Miko at C4 using her BIS weapon. So if you're someone who's lacking on off-field damage character, Albedo is generally the best to go with. Now aside from that, the flower can also make an elevator that helps you with plunging attack. Now aside from some meme plunging attack gameplay, this almost will never be used during real combat, and it's only beneficial during exploration. Do keep in mind though is that the flower is considered a Geo construct, in which it can be broken. His burst basically gives him a little bit of more damage to the set, in that it will first deals AoE Geo damage on the initial hit, but additionally if his burst is performed within the range of the flower, it will also create an additional 7 fatal blossoms that burst violently, dealing AoE damage within the field. So it's always important to basically kind of cast his burst within the field or right after you have casted his E skill. Now the thing with his burst is that it scales with attack, which isn't really beneficial because his E skill actually scales with his defense. As generally you will be wanting to build most of Albedo upon defense so that you have the most off-field damage possible onto his E skill. Therefore, many of the time there is no attack scaling given to his burst. However, what makes his burst very valuable and is very important to be cast is that due to his second passive, he's going to be giving your team 125 EM after casting his burst for up to 10 seconds, which is actually really good, because aside from Sucrose, who is now giving a lot more EM to your team, there aren't really too much skills or a character that can give give up to 125 EM. So this is the reason why that would make Albedo pairs up to all of the Dendro reaction changes that is currently going on in the meta right now, which of course we'll be discussing more about his potential during the team comp sections. And then his passive one just generally gives him a little bit more of damage overall. For basically his E skill is gonna do an extra 25% damage to anyone who's less than 50% HP. So in terms of build priorities, you would want to level Albedo up all the way to 90 because he scales with defense, and defense character gets a massive boost from level 80 to level 90. And then when it comes to talent, you would first want to level up his E skill, then to his burst, and then normal attack if you want to. And furthermore, what's so good about his burst is that it requires only a 40 energy, which is very spammable. Therefore, you almost never have to consider too much about Albedo's energy recharge. Moving on to Albedo's artifacts, the Husk of Opulent Dreams is basically his best in slot. There's almost never any other set that you want to use because it's just give him a massive damage bonus. The only thing with this set though is that the domain in which he will be farming is generally the worst domain that you want to farm in, because on top of the Opulent Dream set, which is only good for defensive scaling character, the other one is our healing set, which is almost never used as well and very niche onto healer only. On top of that, you can also consider Noblesse and Tenacity, which are also a very good set, but due to many other support character on your account most likely already run this set, the Husk of Opulent is always gonna be the best. Now in terms of artifact stats, since you want his E skill to deal as much damage as possible, stacking defense on his artifacts won't generally be the best, but you're gonna be building as if he is a main DPS character, in that the sand is gonna be defense percentage, the cup is gonna be Geo, but if you don't have a good Geo cup, then a defense cup is fine. But in the circlet, it has to be either crit rate or crit damage so that you can scale his E skill damage a lot more, because generally the whole set of Albedo would resolve around defense already, so usually he might lack a lot in crit ratios. Now you can also consider running an attack percentage stance if you want him to deal a little bit more of burst damage, but generally since we already focus on defense on Albedo, providing everything for his E skills is mostly the best. Moving on to his best weapon, it is absolutely free to play because you first have the Cinnabar Spindle, which is an event weapon. However, it's not going to be able for you to get during the time being if you miss out on the event. Therefore, the Harbinger of Dawn R5 is also going to be his top weapon as well, because generally these two weapons have very similar performance. Due to Cinnabar Spindle give you only defense, therefore you need to manage his crit ratio, while Harbinger of Dawn you almost never have to manage crit ratio, for it gives you a ton of it. So if you didn't get Cinnabar Spindle, don't fret out because Harbinger of Dawn is just very good. Onto Albedo Constellation, it is almost never worth it because Albedo has one of the worst constellation in the game, but we'll still be going through his constellation for those who love Albedo and want to get his cons. So his C1 basically gives him a 1.2 energy every time his E skill is activated, which I wouldn't say is worth it because Albedo's bursts already have very low energy cost bursts, so this constellation can be very easily fixed with higher energy recharge Albedo. His C2 basically gives his burst extra damage, but whenever his E skill deals damage, it gives him a stack of what's called Fatal Reckoning, and then once Albedo casts his burst, he will consume all of the stacks, making his burst deal an extra 30% damage for each of the stacks. So it's a pretty decent constellation for Albedo because now you don't really have to worry about his attack anymore, as his burst will get a boost based on his defense. C3 increases his E skill, which is a sizable increase for his damage. C4 gives your active party member an extra damage with plunging attack, which is technically one of the worst in the game because almost no one's going to be using plunging attack until now apart from Shao, and it also doesn't really give Shao that much of an increase, and you already have many other support options to run with. C5 gives him an increase in his burst, and then C6 is just technically the best constellation for Albedo out of all, for it gives your active member who are in shield an extra damage increase of 17%. Now onto our one of the most important section, which which is Albedo's team comp. Since Albedo is basically an off-field support character, he can technically run himself in any team and he will still do very well for himself as well as your whole team. The only question then is that do you actually have a spot for Albedo to run on the team? Because as of right now, there are just so many support characters out there that we usually use. But since he gives your team a lot of off-field damage, he does find himself in the spots of quite some teams. In that, first of all, Geo Resonance team is very good, for he usually runs along with Zhongli. And in this team, you can generally use character like Hu Tao and Xing Chu as well, because this is also one of Hu Tao's best team. Or if you have Yoimiya, you can swap Hu Tao out with her as well, and this team will do absolutely fantastic. Next is Albedo runs really well with Mono Geo team. For Albedo can run along with Ito and then Goro, because they all benefit off of defense scaling. And then on the last slot is pretty flexible, you can just have visual here for more off-field damage. Either that or Albedo also finds himself in a very popular team of what's called an AFK team, where you run him with Zhongli for resonance of Geo and then Kokomi and Yai Miko. This team is basically just as what it says, because you're just going to be setting everyone's E skills and then burst, and then you're just going to be sitting there finding out your enemies has already been all killed. So it's a very fun team to try out if you do have all of these 5-star characters on your account. So those are some of the teams that Albedo usually will run with. But what I really want to discuss here is Albedo's potential with Dendro reaction teams, because that is the main point after our patch 3.0 update. Now of course we've already discussed above that due to Albedo's second passive talent of giving 120 EM to the team, he will work well with teams that requires EM as well as main Dendro resonance reaction team. Because of course, as we've known the trend, Dendro reactions and Dendro characters rely a lot on having their EM. So if we're going to be running Albedo in some of the main Dendro reaction team, we can run him for example in our Electro Quicken team like Kuching, Dendro MC, Kuki Shinobu and Albedo. This team works really well because we're giving Kuching a lot of off-field damage, plus she can still have Dendro reactions. And since Albedo doesn't really react with Dendro, he's gonna be having less chance of messing up your team's reaction. Or you can run a Bloom team of Tainari, Dendro MC, Kokomi and Albedo. The team can work really well as well. Or if you're a Sino main, then you can have Sino, Sucrose, Kuki Shinobu and Albedo, in which this team focus a ton on providing Sino as much EM as possible. So there are many options where Albedo can run with, because as we have discussed, Albedo is an off-field character where he is technically viable in any team that you want him in. And so now that we've basically discussed everything on Albedo, we'll now look into Albedo's pros and cons. In that for his pros, he's the most universally effective and damaging Geo off-field DPS in the game, because he can basically run in any team. He has the lowest field time requirement in the game as well, because you're just going to be switching him in using his E skill, cast his burst and then he is out again. Now due to his E skill activation only once every 2 to 2.5 seconds, it doesn't really interrupt reaction a lot for your team. He also have his burst where he buffed the whole entire team of 125 EM, and then he's basically one of the most free-to-play 5-star character build because he have insanely good free-to-play weapons. As for his cons, since he is Geo element, there's basically no special synergy with any of the character outside of his element. Therefore, he basically has no special synergy with most of the characters. He also struggle having any of the good buff in terms of defense, because up until now there's only Goro who gives defense buff, and then the rest is basically attack buff which only benefits his burst. His best set, which is the Husk of a Pulent Dream, is gonna be one of the worst domain set for you to farm, so it wouldn't be the best place for you to spend your resins in. And so generally overall, Albedo is a very good off-field support character. However, he doesn't always find a lot of his usage in many teams, because there are already a lot of other good support characters out there that have better synergy and works well with any of the team that you plan to run your main DPS in. So due to the Geo element that he has that gives no reaction, it has given Albedo a limited usage. However, it wouldn't be a good idea to slack on Albedo, because whenever you run him in the correct team that we have discussed above, you're going to be seeing a lot of good benefits out of him. And so guys, I hope that this guide have been able to help you have a better understanding of Albedo, especially in our current meta of patch 3.1. For those of you who are planning to pull for Albedo, I wish you luck on getting getting him. And if you're new to this channel guys, be sure to subscribe and join my Discord server as I hold a lot of giveaways. So with that guys, I wish you a super day and I will catch you on my next video.